the current situation with the war between the United States and Iran, because it seems that no more, the war is not between Iran and Israel, because Israel is so much busy with Hezbollah. They're not, fighting Iran anymore. And let's start with what General Keane said on Fox News and his assessment of the current situation. You know that Donald Trump has issued an ultimatum of 48 hours. Then he said it's going to be 5 days. Right now, more 10 days more of, and here is what General Keane said.
A little less than 3 more weeks in the minds of our commanders to complete this operation. Given it's taken a little over 3 weeks to get where we are, you can ascertain then that we have a lot of work still in front of us. And what does that really mean? Well, for a fact, we're going to accomplish all of the assigned objectives that President Trump has given the CENTCOM commander. And in talking to the IDF, they fully intend to accomplish all the objectives that Prime Minister Netanyahu has given to them. And the general time frame is as described, around 3 weeks. If it happens sooner, fine. If they have to take a little longer, we've said from the beginning that this is conditions-based. The enemy has a vote. And what is the enemy trying to do right now? Number one, they're trying to personally survive and keep the regime somewhat intact. And believe me, that is an enormous problem that they have. And you can see that. You're reporting on it every single day here in what is happening to the leadership. And the paranoia that exists inside of that leadership is real. And the chaotic decision-making process in there is real. So we're fragmenting that leadership for sure, and we have weeks to go to do more of that. The second thing they're doing, in addition to trying to survive individually and as a regime, is they're trying to protect their assets. They know we know where everything is, and we're systematically taking them down. Well, they want to save something for sure, so they have the ability to retaliate against what? When we begin to open up the Strait of Hormuz, if we're going to take Carg Island, they're going to want to do some kind of military retaliation against likely allies and partners in the region, and U.S. bases would be the easiest targets. Israel, a more challenging target, to be sure. And they're trying to hide that, deceive that as much as possible, protect some of those resources, while at the same time still trying to fire missiles and drones at our bases and at Israel. So that makes those targets, identification and destruction, more challenging. Are we going to be able to do that? You betcha. But it takes more time, it takes more identification, more tracking to do that. I try to describe it in a football analogy. We're in the red zone here. We're on the 20-yard line. We're trying to get to the goal line, and the opposition is putting as much impediments in because they can see how close we are to attaining our objectives, and they're doing everything they can to prevent that from happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Lima, I just...
Go ahead, Colonel. Go ahead.
I love that analogy. We've been in the red zone a number of times over the last 30 years, and we've never scored a touchdown. I wonder how this is any different. And then the second thing I would say is that you never ask a person in a war or even a simulation if they're accomplishing their objectives, because they will tell you, yes, of course, and they will detail all the objectives that they have accomplished. You ask them, are you accomplishing your mission? And the mission has never been expressed, not by the president, not by the SecDef, not by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Is the mission bombing relentlessly? It appears to be. But there is no question that the mission is not being accomplished if the mission is, as I think they are saying in the corners, to bring the regime down. They haven't done it, and I don't think they're going to do it. So that was an idiotic presentation that I would not even have accepted from a Navy lieutenant commander or an Army major on a game floor without ripping his butt off.
Larry, your take on what's going on and how do you understand the situation?
Keane is delusional. I mean, he lives in a fantasy world. The number one issue should be the Strait of Hormuz. So I didn't appreciate this at the outset of this war either. It's been accumulating knowledge as it goes on. the world is in a recession now. Normally, they define a recession as it's 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. So they say, well, you can't say it's a recession because we haven't had 6 months and we don't have the nonsense. The world is in a recession right now. The question is, will it become a depression? A depression means economic growth drops below 10%, 10% negative. The disruption of oil is one thing. And ironically, in that disruption of oil, Iran has benefited. They went from, Trita Parsi, I forget whose show he was on, but he was explaining that prior to the war, Iran was pumping 1.1 million barrels of oil, selling it at 47. Now they're doing 1.5 million and selling it at 97. So more than double the price. The disruption of liquid natural gas is significant. It's really affecting Asia. Several countries have declared states of emergency because, and they've had this. They stopped frying food because the food's fried out of liquid natural gas. Then you got the fertilizer issue, with more than a third of the world's fertilizer source through the urea that comes out of the petrochemicals there in the Persian Gulf. That's gone. So we're not going to see the full effect of that for about 6 to 8 months, because right now is the planting season. And if the crops aren't getting properly planted with fertilizer, they ain't going to be growing. And that means when it comes time for harvest, you're not harvesting much. So we're looking at a food shortage, global food shortage. And with that applies potential famine in certain, or starvation in certain countries. So, I mean, that's not to be just solved. It doesn't affect us here. We don't know yet the full ramifications of that. Then there's the helium. So it turns out, who knew that the Persian Gulf also was a major source of helium, which is essential for producing computer chips. So now those computer chips aren't getting produced because they don't have the helium. And if those aren't produced, then the computers and the cell phones and the Tomahawk missiles and everything else those computer chips go into are not available. And then the sulfuric acid. I mean, it keeps going on, and it's not opening up. And even if somehow magically things turn around in a day or two, it's still getting the oil and liquid natural gas flowing again, getting the urea flowing again. It's going to take time. So this is having an economic impact on the world that particularly here in the United States we're not paying attention to yet. Starting to, but not fully comprehending it. So, Keene talking about all this. This is reminiscent of McNamara during the Vietnam War, where they'd come out and tell it, we killed X among the Viet Cong today, and all that turned out to be a lie too. So, things haven't changed.
And in addition, Neiman, to what Larry's talking about, which is all the practical side of it, which isn't looking too good at all, as he's just demonstrated. I saw yesterday we're up to 3,500 stranded ships standing off the Strait of Hormuz right now with no place to go. This is the other side of it. And guess who summed this up? I'm going to read this because it's precious from Arashi. He's at the emergency meeting of the UN. Emergency meeting called because of our attack on that school. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, but these are the bullet points. 2 bullying nuclear weapons regimes have attacked a non-weapon regime. Second time they have torpedoed diplomacy. They are normalizing the crimes against humanity, which started with a vengeance, guess where? In Palestine, at the hands of Bibi Netanyahu, and as John Mearsheimer is pointing out, increasingly, probably on a pretext, because most of the people killed on October the 7th were killed by Israelis and not by Hamas. 27 days of illegal war, Arachi continues. No regard for humanitarian law whatsoever. 600 schools, hospitals, nursing homes, ambulances stationary and on the move, water sources, food sources, all war crimes, all a product of the world ignoring Palestine, bringing it back to the genocide that, has almost been buried now. But we have resolve, he ends up. We have resolve. I believe he does, and I believe his country does. We are becoming not only stalled at sea, as it were, as Larry pointed out, with grievous ramifications economically for not just us, but for the world. We are also becoming the most hated nation on the face of the earth, next only to Israel.
Yeah.
Larry, it seems that the situation with the, with the invasion of Iran, or the invasion of islands of Iran in the Persian Gulf is getting serious, because what would be the escalation on the part of the United States and Israel? I think the next step could be an invasion of these islands. And many people are arguing which one would, are they going to invade various islands in the Persian Gulf? Are they going to go after one? And here is one of them, which is so interesting in terms of the strategy. This island is called Larak Island. Yeah. Larak, it comes here. You see the route of the tankers is coming from here and going to the close to the Qeshm Island, between the Qeshm Island and Larak. It passes here. If they get this island, it could be it could make some sort of problem. And the other, you go up to here, what they're talking about here, this island here, Hark, which is far away, from the Strait of Hormuz. And what is your understanding, Larry, of the strategy that they're seeking for right now?
What was that word you used? Is that strategy? God, boy, you're an optimist. Look, let's start with what we know. Last week, it was published on this, it's called Open Source Intelligence Defender on X. And that source was reporting on another source called the Intel Frog. Well, the Intel Frog detailed that since March 12th, the flight of C-17s that were going from, 35 flights with 11 more to go, reported. And so when I started looking at the bases, you realize this is a special operations mission that they're launching, because they're at Joint Base Lewis McChord. Well, that's 75th Rangers 2nd Battalion, I believe. Hunter Army Airfield, Task Force 160. It's got an element of that regiment deployed there, plus 75th Rangers 1st Battalion. Now understand that the 75th Rangers within the world of special operations, they're what they call a Tier 2 unit. They provide support to Delta Force SEAL Team 6. And in the 23 years I was doing exercises, we always jokingly said, every exercise, we had to have an airfield that the Rangers could seize. That's one of the things they do. They go seize an airfield. The other flights, and we're talking not just one or two C-17s, we're talking multiple flights from each of these bases. Oceana Naval Station, Virginia, who's there? SEAL Team 6, as well as the East Coast SEALs. Pope Army Airfield, that's Delta Force 82nd Battalion. The 82nd Airborne, excuse me. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, headquarters of Task Force 160, the Night Stalkers. So it was clear that there was this movement. Now, there are only two things that are, when you see that kind of movement, it can only mean one of two things. It's an exercise, or they're going into battle. And based upon things I've heard from, I've got another friend who's buddies with somebody in Delta, and Delta is just saying they're sending us on a suicide mission. So they're really, they're going to send it. Now, Trump initially announced that when I heard him do the 5-day last Monday, you thought, okay, that means, Friday today or tomorrow, we're going to start the shoot. And originally that's what it looked like. And let me make one other point. Remember, that air movement started on March 12th. March 13th, they launched the first MEU, the 31st MEU out of Okinawa. Said, okay, you head to there. So this tells me this is planned. You don't start something on March 12th, March 13th as just an immediate, oh my God, we got a problem we've got to solve. No, this is planned out. The deployment of the 11th MEU, they're about a week behind, a week to 10 days, which now explains, I think yesterday, Trump announced, oh, okay, we're going to give them till April 6th, April 7th. That's next week. And that's when that other MEU will be in the area. So the intent of Trump is they are going to launch a ground operation. Now, on Keshem Island, my understanding is that there is one of those underground missile cities there. So they would specifically task either Delta Force or SEAL Team 6 with attacking and capturing that site. They're assuming that Iran doesn't have any defenses in place. I think that's a very foolish assumption. And actually, I don't think Delta would or SEAL Team 6 would assume that. So you're going to look at a battle that if they capture that missile city, okay, that they've got that, but that still doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz. And if you put military forces on any of those islands, that does not open the Strait of Hormuz because Iran can still start deploying more mines into the waters, and they've said that they would. They said they'd flood the Gulf with mines, not just there in the Strait. They've got underwater drones. They've got submarines with torpedoes. Then they've got the missiles above ground and the drones above ground. So if you're going to open the Strait, the mission has got to be, we've got to shut down all of Iran's offensive capabilities, and just putting guys on these islands is not going to do that.
And further, Neiman, I have heard so many experts, I put that in quotation marks, in the last 48 hours down at William & Mary, I heard a number of them talking about the Strait and the geography of the Strait. Man, I've been there, done that. I was doing some of the planning around Ernest Will and Praying Mantis at Pacific Command. They get it wrong. One person said, well, the average depth of the Strait is so deep that you couldn't do much to it. The average depth of the Strait is 50 meters. Now, that's pretty deep. That allows you to sink a supertanker, for example, and probably not have impediments, but it's not all that deep. And one of the things we were worried about was several ships being sunk and blocking that. And oh, by the way, the North Channel, I think the north goes on the right side if you're looking up north, and the south goes on the left side. They're different channels, and they're slightly different in terms of salinity, current, and other things that impact passage through the strait. But this is not an easy strait to open if somebody is intent on keeping it closed, as we learned in 1988. And they're talking about it as if it were, you know, as Larry was saying, you just do this, you get this, and you get that, and you can keep them from blocking the strait. Au contraire, it is awfully easy to block that strait. And I'm sure Iran has given it detailed study since their efforts in 1988. In fact, I would say they're probably leagues ahead, as Larry was pointing out, with weaponry and methodologies and such. And it just doesn't take much. And as Larry was pointing out before, to scare the world to death, and insurers and shippers alike, all you got to do is get one. That's all you got to do. And then it takes a long time before any Navy can convince people that, hey, you can sail again.
Yeah, and let's recall that what happened in 1988, that was all in the context of the Iraq-Iran war, which the United States helped provoke and sustain. Remember, the United States was not just providing the chemical precursors to Iraq to manufacture chemical weapons, but it was also providing intelligence. I know Colonel Patrick Lang, Pat Lang, who set up the Arabic program at West Point, later was the the senior defense intelligence officer for the Middle East. he was the one that was hand carrying the intelligence to Iraq to help Iraq defeat Iran. And so when Iran started mining the straits, then, and this shows you how things have changed in almost 40 years. We had a barge off the coast of Bahrain. It was called the Hercules barge. It was an oil platform, but it was taken over by Navy SEALs. And the SEAL that commanded that is a friend of mine. He was a commander at the time. And they had little birds, and they had their own gunboats, and they had several clashes with Iran. But at the time, Iran wasn't attacking with drones. Iran wasn't attacking with missiles. So Iran was really in sort of the early days of its military capability. Whole different ball game today, completely different.
Well, they set up on a couple of derricks, as I recall, and we wiped them out on the derricks because they were just open on these derricks.
Yeah.
They won't be like that this time around, I guarantee you.